Hi, this is Tony. I'm going to be taking you through the Leica M9 or the M9-P, very similar cameras. Bit of a kind of a retrospective review. So we're looking back quite a few years to the first Leica full frame digital. Still a very sought after unit. So if you like this video, click below or there. If you want to keep up to date, please consider subscribing and you'll get a little indication of when my next video is up. So this camera is how I got into Leica in the first place. Bit of a story behind it. My dad, who unfortunately is no longer with us, went into a camera shop, and my dad, being my dad, said, right, I want the best camera you got. They sold him this and he got it home. He had a little bit of fun with it, but it really wasn't for him. He probably, what he did, he wanted something that automatically focused. So he asked me if I wanted it, and I said yeah. I'd already had Nikons, been used to those for years and years, and I took this off his hands. I had a little play around with it and I thought, whoa, those files on the computer, they are huge, and they were back then. My hard drive was getting banged out with images from this. Also, I wasn't familiar with the focus techniques. You know, my dog would be running past and my dog would be completely out of focus, or running towards me. I couldn't work it out. So what I did, I put it in a drawer for about 18 months. Carried on with my Nikons. Bought a little Fuji, and the Fuji was kind of emulating Leica. So I thought, well, hang on a minute, I'll have a little look at the Leica. Opened the drawer, pulled it out, took my time this time. I studied the rangefinder, the focusing technique. I studied the zone focus, and I thought, whoa, this camera actually has got a lot of potential. Images were spot on. The contrast was lovely, the colour rendition was lovely, and from that moment onwards I became an addict, a Leica addict, probably much like you are, or you will be if you're watching this. So this was the beginning of my journey, and since then I've got quite a few waiting to be looked at on this here channel, which we'll look at in the future. So the M9, let's have a little look at its history. This is the M9-P, by the way. Not a great deal of difference, but it was the first full frame digital camera that Leica brought out. So it's a full frame sensor. It's got a CCD sensor in it, and that I think is part of the magic. The cameras after then, like the M10, they've got a CMOS sensor. So slightly different renditioning, but it does make this camera almost unique in its images. So the M9-P, this particular camera, was introduced 2011. The M9 was introduced 2009. So M9-09. So quite a few years ago since they introduced the full frame digital. Now both M9 and M9-P are CCD sensor, and they got 18 megapixels, which back then I thought was quite a lot. Now it's really not. But does it matter? Not really. Not unless you blow up your images huge. If you're going to post on Instagram, it really doesn't matter. So the sensor size to me at the moment doesn't matter too much, but the color renditioning is second to none. Something to do with the CCD, I don't know what it is, but the colours are vibrant, which I like. A lot of my style was bright colours. I like to see the world in a bright, colourful way. Also, the contrasts are quite significant. So if you've got a very sunny day, you got a lot of black, you got a lot of brights. If you flip this to black and white, you can produce some really nice black and whites, contrasty shots. So yes, it's got a unique sensor in it. The M9-P is slightly different to the M9. You'll notice there's no red dot on the P. They like to make them very street, insignificant. Yeah, no red dot. On the top of the camera, you'll notice a nice engraving. I think that's different to the M9. Gives it kind of a vintage look. And on the back here, we've got quite a few buttons actually when you compare it to the later models, M10. But you've got a screen here which is toughened glass, and Leica call it sapphire crystal. Very, very tough apparently. It's the only camera I've got that I haven't felt the need to cover it with a protection screen or protection glass. Sapphire crystal, supposed to be very tough. I've not scratched it yet, and it's banging against me as I'm walking and hiking, and it's been a lot of places with me. Been to Australia, been to America, been through various airports, and it's still not scratched. So it's got a very, very tough glass on it. It's an LCD screen, obviously. People do criticise the LCD screen. For me, it's not a problem. I don't spend too much time looking at this once I've taken a shot. I usually shoot, move on. Yeah, it looks fairly okay. Move on, take another shot. I don't know why. Some people get very fascinated by the amount of pixels on the screen at the back. That really doesn't bother me. It's good enough for you to be able to just scan through your images and just have a little look, you know, if you really want to. So it's adequate. It's adequate. At the time when they released it, they said it was a quieter shutter. Again, it's something, if you compare it to the Ps, the QP, M9-P, it certainly isn't quiet, although I quite like it. So I have a little listen, ready? So you've got that kind of whirring. I quite like that. Yeah, it's a little bit of feedback when you take a picture. But the newer cameras are a lot quieter. The batteries in here are different to the M10. One little word of warning, you know, it's always good to carry two batteries anyway. But if you needed a second battery or need to replace your battery, I would stay away from the third-party batteries. I bought one in the past, and I've certainly heard it from friends that they don't charge particularly well. They'll often say that they're charged, and you go pop it in your camera out in the street, and 2 shots later and it's telling you the battery's run out. There's nothing worse than carrying around a beautiful camera that's completely useless and dead for the rest of the day. You've probably been there. I have. It's annoying, to say the least. So I would always recommend you buying Leica batteries. I know they're a lot of money, but you want reliability. If you didn't want reliability, you wouldn't have bought a Leica. So don't mess around with third-party batteries. You might be lucky, but for me, it's not worth the risk at all. So I'm going to compare it to a M6. Let me get my M6 out here. Obviously, with the digitals, what Leica were intending to do was emulate the film cameras, because they worked and because they felt good in the hand. They're designed to be carried in various places, and they do the job. So they're on their way. You can see here with the M9, Leica were on their way to emulating the film camera, which is the M6 in this instant. You can see the M6 is a lot thinner. So the M9 wasn't quite there yet. It's a lot fatter. Let's have a look at the front. Yeah, and the top, as you're saying, yeah. So they're on their way to emulating the sort of body of the M6, but it is a lot fatter. But I don't mind that. I've got big hands, fits my hands. Weight wise, not a great deal in it, really. Not a great deal. What I've added to the M9-P, I've got a soft release button, red, although I've got a black one, and I've got a thumb thumb grip here, which is also a red. I quite like the look of that, but that can go on and come off. It doesn't bother me. So as I said, 18 megapixels in the M9. M10 came along and it's got 24 megapixels. So it's constantly going up. The M10R is even greater, I believe. So, but again, it doesn't bother me. The JPEGs, people have said that the JPEGs at this camera are not very good. For me, they're fine. I don't want to mess around, you know, editing, say, like 150 raw images. It's not the way I operate. If it's a great picture, money shot, I'll spend time on a raw image. But when I'm taking lots of shots, I want a good JPEG. I want it to come out and look good with a minor tweak. That's all you need. So yeah, I think the JPEGs are fine with this camera. I've not had a problem with them. People say about the LCD screen, we've gone into that. Again, that suits me. Sometimes all you need to do is a quick look down, if that. You know, shoot, move on. That's my advice. So with these reviews, I always do a 3 and 1. So 3 things I like about the unit, 1 thing that perhaps could be improved upon, or 1 thing that I don't get on with, maybe. So 3 things I like about this. 1 is the simplicity, and that's going to be the same with all Leicas. You've got your shutter speed there. Easy. I usually keep that on A most of the time. You've got your aperture, which part of the lens, and you've got your ISO. You get those 3 things right, along with the focus, and you can't go wrong. You know, if you get a good shot, it's down to you. If the shot isn't great, it's down to you. So there's no taking away what you want with this camera. Second thing that I like, I mentioned it before, the color rendition and the contrast are really, really special. They're almost unique, I think. And yes, you could perhaps emulate them using Lightroom. But for me, it comes straight out the camera looking good. So yeah, the color rendition and contrast are a characteristic of the M9-P. What I like about it, I quite like the weight of it. It doesn't feel too heavy, and it fits my hand. I quite like the size of it, with or without the thumb rest. Quite like it. One thing perhaps could be improved on, but I think it's the product of the CCD sensor, and that is the low light performance. It tends to struggle a little bit with low light, whack up the ISO, and then you get a little grain, which again, that you can use that to your advantage. That can emulate a good old style Kodak film, you know, with a bit of noise in it. So you can use it to your advantage, but if it's a good sunny day, I'll take this out. If the light is a little bit poor, I might take the M10 out. So it does depend. But be aware of that. One thing about the CCD sensor, it was there was an issue with it. It was the coating to the sensor was becoming corroded. So if you do buy a second-hand M9-P, check that it's had the sensor updated. This one I sent back to Leica. They replaced the sensor. They calibrated the rangefinder, and they changed the skin, which they have to do because they have to damage it in order to get into it, apparently. So when I got it back, it was almost like a new camera, but a familiar camera. So this has got a new sensor in it, and apparently it doesn't get corroded. So that I'm really pleased with that. So be aware of that. The corrosion, actually, it looks like almost dust on your images. You give it a blowout and there's still dust on the images. Give it a little clean, and as you clean it, you can go quite hard on the sensor. It is coated, but you get the correct wipes. And what I was finding was it was almost like little divots in the sensor, little troughs. And clearly that wasn't dust. it wasn't something stuck on the sensor, but a little craters in the sensor. That apparently was the issue, and it was the coating of the sensor I've been made aware of. But as I said, great cameras. So please consider liking this video. Please consider subscribing to my channel. Next look at retrospectively will be the M10, which I went from this to the M10. And I'll be retrospectively reviewing that, giving my 3-in-1, and having a little bit of fun with that, making a little bit of comparison to this and maybe to the M9-P. But till then, see you later, have fun shooting, and see you soon.